we have lost our purpose in life. Work was our purpose, and now we don't have purpose. And those are the ones we related to. So this phase, which started as an inquiry, started evolving as a community, which we then call what's next, because people say, well, what's next for us in life? Let this phase of life be a time of growth, reinvention, transformation, and experimentation. A lot of shuns there.
Hi, welcome to Switching Mindsets. This is Anuradha, and today I'm speaking to Mehbs Remtulla, the founder and CEO of What's Next 50, which is on a mission to empower builders or mid-late career individuals and self-described retirees to lead an engaged life full of vigor, intent, and purpose. So that's the short of it, and Mehbs is going to give us the long of it. And so tell me, like we were just speaking, what is What's Next 50 and how did it start?
Terrific. Thank you, Anu, for the opportunity to be part of your podcast. And I'm delighted to share a few thoughts on what's next. And hopefully, we can communicate these messages to a broader world because as the population is aging around the globe and we're living longer and healthier, I think we have an incredible opportunity of longevity that we need to take advantage of. So to start off, what's next is many initiatives of this kind and organizations of this kind start with a personal story. So born in Tanzania, East Africa, schooled in England, and now living in Canada for 40 years. What I think has made us global citizens, although my kids call it misfit in a modern world, has enriched us in many ways. And I was lucky to have started a company at the tender age of 30. It was an advertising communications company focused in healthcare, which I ran for 20 years. And at the tender age of 49, had the opportunity to exit. And while I was bullish because I was at the prime of this career and of this business, my spouse, my better half, suggested that I should at least go and listen to a potential buyer. And anyway, long story short, we merged with an amazing organization called Havas, which was at the time the third largest communications company in the world. And somebody had asked me as the deal was going through what I was going to do next. And I thought that was a silly question because my aspirations, my desire, and my outlook after I left the business world was to spend time with my family, do the things that I never had time for, that I would not have to catch that 7 o'clock flight to Montreal every week, which I did for 4 years. And it would be a life of luxury and leisure. Well, the first 6 months were exactly that. There were an incredible opportunity to travel. We went to India, went to Japan, we went to Africa. And after 6 months of this euphoria, I came back home to Toronto and had no purpose. I would go to the gym, spend 2 hours and sort of an hour. I would read the national newspaper cover to cover, and I could tell you of any story in some depth. That took an hour. I checked my 3 emails, not 300 emails, and that took an hour. And by midday, there was nothing to do. And having been engaged in entrepreneurship and fairly heavy and engaging lifestyle, I found that traumatic. And I would say this phase of leaving full-time work and getting into what I call a cliff was probably the most difficult transition of my lifetime. And when I think back now, why was that the case? Well, three things happened. I lost my identity, which was so tightly tied to my work life. I lost my network, which was tied again to work. I lost structure. And in some cases, I thought I was losing friends because when I asked my friends for the third coffee that month, they thought something was wrong with me physically, mentally, and otherwise. And it was just that I had more time and they didn't have the time. So I started experimenting, and one of the areas I started was volunteering and mentoring a number of startups at an incubator here in Toronto called the Mars Institute. And during that time, I met a wonderful friend who is now a business associate, Peter Haywood. And I said to him over a coffee, Peter, what do people do when they leave full-time work? because I was a CEO of a 70-person office within Toronto and Montreal on a Friday, and I was just Mehbs on a Monday, and that transition was actually quite daunting. And he said, Mehbs, I haven't got a clue, but let's start talking to people. So that started what was, I would say, an inquiry into what do people do when they live full-time work. And one of my other friends who was a researcher, Rick Wolf, said, let's do kitchen table conversations. And this is a form of research where he would gather 6, 8 people around a kitchen table or a dining table in my home on a Tuesday evening for 2 hours, and we would have coffee and biscuits or sometimes wine and cheese. And we just talk about how life is and after living full-time work. And they didn't see themselves as retirees, but they saw themselves as somebody who had left full-time work. And there's a good distinction. And what we found was exactly what I had discovered. One, the loss of identity, structure, networks, and this yearning for learning, which had now disappeared. And we also discovered that people less than the retirement age, which in Canada is 65, were going through this phase. So at times we had people from the age of 48, 52, 61, and then, of course, the 65-year-olds around the table. Some of them were just happy and were actually little curious as to why we were asking that question. They were playing golf 7 days a week. They were taking time to be with their grandchildren. They were traveling. They were eating good meals, and they were happy. And I thought, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. And then others, the majority, said, we have lost our purpose in life. Work was our purpose, and now we don't have purpose. And those are the ones we related to. So this phase, which started as an inquiry, started evolving as a community, which we then call What's Next, because people say, well, what's next for us in life? And so the community has now grown to about 1,400 members around the globe, from India to Singapore to China to Japan, South and North America, Canada and the UK and the EU, and of course, Africa and Brazil. So What's Next is now a community, a global community of transitioners whom we define as mid to late career individuals and self-described retirees. And through research and testing 2 versions of our online platform, we found that people at this stage in life are looking for 3 things where we can add value. Number one, they're looking at building new networks. And being a global community, that seems to attract them to the What's Next initiative. And they want to get together and get to know each other from a global standpoint of like-minded people. Number 2, they want to be part of a growth mindset to lifelong learning. So just because we have left full-time work doesn't mean that learning stops. Now, when I talk about learning, I'm not talking about going to the IIT to do a master's or PhD in economics. I'm talking about understanding life transitions of purpose. We want to have people understand what friendships are all about. People want to learn about how does the Indian culture revere their elders, which is different from other cultures in the world, and that kind of a learning. And we have been very fortunate to be associated with incredible global thought leaders like Chip Conley, whom you heard last week, like Carl Honoré, who lives in London, a Canadian, like Arminia Ibarra, who is a professor at the London Business School in organization behavior, and many others. So that's number 2. We talked about wanting to form new connections, new networks, building new networks. We talked about lifelong learning with a growth mindset. And the third part that excites me the most is that I know the group of people that are in our community have accumulated incredible lived and life experiences and wisdom. And they are very keen to give back with purpose. So the question is, how do we leverage this enormous asset that we have in our backyard for the greater good? So the community members are forming what we call affinity groups. And they're forming these groups in small cohorts. 4 or 5 community members will look at a challenge in their community on a local level, national level, or international level, and say, how do we leverage our experiences and our passions and our interests in solving these issues in our communities, these challenges in our communities that create social impact. So I'll give you an example. In Toronto, there's a rough area of Toronto with marginalized youth from the ages of 15 to 22. And they often get into trouble for various reasons. They have no direction. Their parents are what we call latchkey parents, meaning they both go to work. These kids come home from school at 3 o'clock. They have nowhere to go and they get into mischief. And one of our community members is part of an organization called Urban Squash, a sport that is not well known in Canada, which is known in India and the UK. And he decided with his team that sport could be a means to redirect the efforts of these young people. So Urban Squash has set up a program where they bus in 50, 70 students from 3 schools in Toronto to a site where there are other tutors, university students who can mentor them and who can help them in terms of with their homeworks and help them do their homework for an hour or two. They get a meal while they're there, and then they put on a squash court for an hour. And that releases their energy. And what they've found, not only have their academic scores gone up substantially, but they're getting such amazing feedback from the parents. The parents are saying that these kids are better adjusted socially. They have more mental capacity to focus on things that matter, and they become better human beings. That's one example. Another example is of Deb Stevens in New York City, who is helping a group of, again, inner city kids in New York City, and they're helping within this group to tutor fresh graduates from a university in interviewing skills. These kids have come through online efforts and they're on social media because they don't have personal skills when they go for interviews. So many of them fail interviews. So this group is helping them, with the help of their community members who are all seniors, help these kids learn interviewing skills. So that's another example of what's happening. And the third example, and I'll stop there, is a former architect in Toronto, his group with a bunch of builders. And homelessness, as you know, is a global issue. It happens in India, it happens in Africa, it happens in North America, and Toronto is no exception. So we have a lot of homeless people that have set up camps in parks. And can you imagine these people being in the parks in the middle of winter when it's minus 15 degrees in tents that are not heated? So Sheila is trying to get the city to release some city land so she can build some cabins, because this is a community that if you put them in 5-star hotels, they won't know what to do. They've never turned on a knob with the key in their homes. They don't have homes. They don't know how to put a shower on. They don't know how to light a gas burner for cooking. And if you put them into apartments, they won't know what to do. And that strategy has proved to be a failure. But in the Netherlands and other areas, they have built cabins in parks, which is their community, with one little area, less than 300 square feet, where they can be taught to live by themselves in a community setting. They can improve their lifestyle, and so that's a major project which is going through. So to recap, What's Next is a global community of transitioners who are in midlife transitions. They range age-wise from 45 to 85. It's a global community focused on 3 key areas: forming new networks and forming connections, 2, creating a growth mindset for learning, and 3, finding a purposeful way of giving back.
Yeah, fantastic. I like how you've called them transitioners and not retirees. So that's a great word. And, you mentioned Chip Conley and the wonderful session that, What's Next 50 hosted. So in that, he, the author of the Midlife Manifesto, And he mentioned how the midlife is, it's not a crisis. It's basically you're a chrysalis, right? So you're emerging from it
That's
as,
right.
imagine a beautiful butterfly or your next life or something, right? So it sounds wonderful. So the thing is, you talked about finding purpose, and what you said right in the beginning was that, it started with a process of inquiry. So, for all these people that you've spoken about, they're doing such wonderful work and they found their calling, so to speak. So, how does one do that? Like I was telling my niece recently that, I have to do something, but then I have to go back and look at my passion in my childhood. But my passion was writing, and that's what I did. So, I don't know if I have a second passion. So, I'll have to figure out maybe in adulthood something else that interests me.
Yeah.
So, how do you go back,
Yeah.
find purpose, and how does that process of inquiry work?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I don't think we have a definitive answer, but I'll share some of the thoughts that have come through the What's Next community and what Chip talks about at MEA, and also an amazing speaker called Richard Leiter, who does a lot of work in this area of purpose. So, few thoughts. Purpose is not something you gain or you look out for. It's not like going to a gym to build muscle or to stay fit.
Yeah.
And then number one, number two, purpose comes in small P's and big P's. So, and I think purpose is the approach that I think Richard and Chip take to purpose is we have a tendency when we're looking for a purpose to say, let's do an analysis, almost like a ledger. What are we good at? And, rather than saying where do we start as a beginner? What is something that we want to initiate as a beginner and learn? So, and I did that myself. When I left full-time work, my thought was, okay, I'm good at sciences, I'm good at entrepreneurship, I enjoy healthcare, and those were my strengths from a professional standpoint. But my inner self what was not saying the same things. My inner sense was saying, I want to give back because I feel so fortunate and blessed to have had the opportunity to interact with people that helped me be successful. And my question was, how can I help other people be successful in their lives? And that drove to purpose to say, wow, I love people. I love helping, and I get the most joy when I see the whites of people's eyes when I do something for them, with them, alongside them, and say, Mehbs, that was amazing. And quite honestly, I see myself as a catalyst. I don't do things because all of these things, Anu, are staring at you in front of your nose. It's just that we haven't opened that flower to say, oh my God, there's 6 petals here, not 3 petals, right? And I think it is a sense of inquiry. And sometimes I think we need to ask our deeper self, what am I passionate about? And as Chip mentioned at the event that we had last week, he said the question he asked people is not at a cocktail party, not about what do you do, but what are you all about? What are you a beginner at?
Yeah, I loved
You
that, what
know,
he said. Yeah.
yes, I
Yeah.
think that's a nice way of framing it. That we should be holistic in our approach in that, and not be in a rush. And I think something that Erminia Ibarra says time and time again, we're so fearful of trying and failing. And she says it's better to try and fail than not try. And I think that's another mindset that we need to embrace because all our lives we've been told, make sure whatever you do, you've thought it through so you succeed. But at this stage in life, I think, we need to try things. I'll give you an example. Before I left full-time work, the idea of being on a board really excited me. I thought, wow, what a wonderful way to give back to an organization and help them. Well, when I left full-time work, I joined 2 boards. One was an immensely satisfying experience. It was for a nonprofit. The other one, which was for a profit, well, it was a nonprofit, but it was a paid board membership, was not so fantastic. I just felt that being around a group of people that allowed you to do things was more important than following corporate steps and stuff like that. So I think, but I'm glad that I tried it, and I went and took a course at the University of Toronto on governance for board members. So it gave me some structure as to how to approach things, which was very helpful. But a lot of things we do through intuition. And I think we don't trust our intuition enough. And this is a time in life where if we truly are going to live till 90 and 95, then these wonderful years should be one of experimentation, transformation, and exploration. And I think that's the mindset. And I think the mindset is probably more important than what actually you do. So to your point, how do you look for purpose? I don't think you look for purpose. You try things and ask your deeper self. And I think this alone time that Chip talked about, or looking at your calendar and saying, "Oh my God, how come Friday morning is I don't have any meetings?" You say, "What am I going to do?" Well, of course, you can do your laundry and go and buy groceries and go to the dry cleaners and the bank, but also allow yourself an hour in the park of just walking, listening to birds, and enjoying the sunshine, which you have a lot of in India. And every minute of the day does not have to be occupied with things to do. And productivity is not about that. I think creativity flows from some alone time, which, quite honestly, many of us are not very good at.
That's very true. We're not very good with alone time. I'm not. So I'm getting better
Most
at
of
it.
us aren't.
Yeah, I'm getting better.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
this, you mentioned the growth mindset. I think that is very important in trying new things, failing at it, and still picking up. So, this like growth mindset, for those who are not aware, it's not about success and failure. You're better than when you started, right? That's what it is. So
Absolutely.
it's not black and white like that. So I see myself also doing these things, trying on certain things and saying yes to everything, because I'm a freelancer right now. So my policy is just say yes to everything. If it doesn't work, we'll think about it. So yeah, I guess that's a good thing. Just try out new stuff, right? And see
Yes,
what gives you joy.
experiment. Yes. And I think the other thing that we talked about is that this fear of failure. I think failure should be taken out as a word out of the English vocabulary. I think in
Yeah,
life, there are successes and learnings. And I think we should focus on learnings, and I think that's something we don't teach our children too well. We always say, well, if your child came second or third in class, our immediate question as a parent is, well, who came first? And I
absolutely.
think
Yeah.
that's not very productive.
Yeah.
I think we need to celebrate the child coming third or fifth or 19th or whatever, and then said, well, what were the learnings? And the learnings might be, well, Dad, Mom, I think if I'd spent some time with my friend X, Y, and Z, and we'd done this together, she's really good at X and I'm really good at Y. And I think combined, we would have probably done a better job individually. And I think we should be allowing ourselves to learn from experiences. So I think at this stage in life, most of us have accomplished a lot, hopefully. And it's not a question of succeeding or failing. It's a question of what did we learn and how did it help us grow as individuals. And I think this is a growth phase for us. It should be a growth phase. It's not a phase of decline. It's a phase of opportunity. And truly, if people like Joseph Coughlin from the MIT Age Lab says that, we've been given an extra 30 years of life and we don't know what to do with it. Well, we should know what to do with it, because let's explore, let's transform, let's expand, and let's be productive in that sense.
Yeah. This extra 30 years of life, that you're talking about. And there are so many, the map of life now, and, living up to 100 years. And I guess what's next 50, that's what it means as well. The next 50 years, that's what it means.
Well, interesting that you put a spin on it. Thank you. You just gave me an idea now. See, I learned something already. The What's Next 50 was really put as it's not a retirement. People 50 plus do not retire, they grow. So the 50 is meant to signify that you need to start early. I have nephews and nieces now in their 50s, and I encourage them to be thinking about their next 30, 40, 50 years, because many of them will live into their 80s and 90s for sure. And I think, and the second idea around the What's Next 50 is that this extra 30 years should not be attached to the later part of life. It should come in the middle. My wife went to law school at the age of 55.
Yes, I was in the breakout room with her. She mentioned.
There you go.
Yeah,
And
it was
although
wonderful.
she says the learning of law was more exciting than the practice of law, but she said, what it's done is it's opened my mind and brain in thinking in a certain way, which I could have not gotten if I hadn't gone. So it was a growth mindset. And quite honestly, What's Next 50 was just in its infancy stages at that time. So I can't credit her success and her growth because of what's next. But, this was again one of the situations where she was in her early 50s and the kids had left home and they were on their own now. And I was embarking on volunteering and starting what's next. And she said, "What should I do?" And she's always has this inkling about law, although she's a nuclear physicist. That's what she did as an undergrad in the UK. She's always had this desire, and she often teases me that she probably watched too many episodes of LA Law and Perry Mason, and had this false impression of what lawyers do. But she interacted with 27 and 30-year-olds who treated her with the same level of contempt and friendliness as they would their 27-year-old friends. And she found this multi-generational interaction to be so immensely powerful. And she often teases our children that these fellow students were much kinder and nicer than her own kids are to her. But
Yeah.
so that was a wonderful experience of interacting. She learned a lot, and she's now applying her thinking, not necessarily her legal experience, but her thinking that came out of this 4 years of excruciating pain, as I know it was, because I watched her. There were days when she would be up till 4 in the morning and then go to a class at 8:30 and forget whether she had dinner the night before. I mean, many professions of that type are quite intense. But, so that was an example of somebody who at 55 went and what is done. Not that she's going to make oodles of money now, but it is opened her mind to other possibilities. And I think that the way she interacts with with people and issues is different than if she hadn't gone. And of course, needless to say, she's been a tremendous resource to the family on legal issues. Not that she's an expert in every field, but of course, when you have a lawyer in the family, the first question is, "Sheila, can you help us with this, this, and that?" And she has to qualify that I'm not giving advice, I'm giving an opinion,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's great. I have a friend who's just finished, he's just got his law degree and in his late 40s. And I spoke to him yesterday and he was like, I just sat down and I was that sense of achievement. He said, 3 years ago, I was talking about it and now it's done. There's this huge
it's
sense of achievement that
fantastic.
you've done this. And a lot of us asked
Absolutely.
him that, at this age, do you think you can be a lawyer now? All those things. But I think it's just worth
Yes.
it to get that high and the fact that you can do something. And like you said, it makes you a different person. It changes you, right? Learning something new.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
also
absolutely.
personally love that nervous excitement, because I've also, doing the same thing for 30 years and suddenly you do this new course or you're trying something new or, working on an Excel and that nervousness, that fear, okay, am I getting this right? Am I going to be, will I be able to do this? That nervousness, that fear, it's wonderful. After some time, you
Right,
realize, see,
right.
this is what life is about.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. And Chip gave an example of this 85-year-old that came to MEA and learned to surf. I mean, I'd be
yeah.
petrified to swim, let alone surf at that age, right? And I think, and that's why, if your mindset is try, and even if you don't succeed in the old way, it's okay, but you tried. And, as people say, better to try and fail than not try. And failure should not be part of our vocabulary. It's a learning. So what did you learn from that? And
Yeah.
those learnings have a longer impact and impact on your life moving forward.
No, I love that.
And doing this
Success and
within,
learnings. I really like that.
yes. And I think the other part we tend to not, and men are not as good as women are, that, when you're doing this within a warm, a friendly, a like-minded community, it makes it so much easier. When you talk to a friend and say, "I'm going through this," and they say, "Yeah, well, so what's the point? You're not the only one. many of us go through that. This feeling that you're not alone has been something that many of our members have played back to us. That Mehbs, what we love about What's Next is we come for the learnings, but we live with the community. And I think that's such a powerful thing to say, because I think we all yearn to be part of a community. And I think as this group of the population grows, I think you'll see more and more need, and I guess the impact of how a community rallies around these kind of issues within midlife, whether it be with finances, or about living conditions, about learning, about growth, whatever it is, And I think many institutions now are beginning to sense that. Universities are now engaging in programming for the transitioners. Developers in North America are looking at how do people in their 80s live today than the way they lived 30 years ago. And I think that's changing. This whole idea of multi-generational housing, which in Europe, and I find that the UK and Europe are far ahead on this than North America is. There's a project in the Netherlands where university students are offered accommodation in this apartment complex with a caveat: your rents will be subsidized substantially, but you need to spend 5 hours a week helping a senior in that building. So it's a multi-generational building. And many of the students have formed relationships way past their graduation. There's people almost like they're surrogate parents or grandparents. And the older folks love it because they're getting somebody to help them with their tablet and their computer needs or whatever. So this cross-fertilization and multi-generation interaction is going to be the wave of the future. And we're seeing this happening among the working groups in employment, right? Now, India has an interesting, opportunity. You've got a young population growing fast, and you get an older population growing fast because of the size of your population. So it'll be interesting to see how countries like India manage these two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, and what you said on multi-generational, living and workplaces, etc. I had interviewed Neeraj Sagar, who you know very well, the founder of Wisdom Circle, and we spoke about that as well, and sharing wisdom and how it works very well. Maybe not immediately, but it works pretty well eventually, right? So, could you talk about how multi-generational workplaces look like? How does that work?
Well, I think you
or even communities, because that's your forte. So like even communities, how does it work?
Yes. So the UK, as I was saying, is far ahead of this curve than any other country that I know of, and I think France and Europe is getting there. North America is a bit behind. I think the first idea that the UK and Europe have taken is, within an organization, we now have 4 or 5 generations working together. It's a fact. It's happening globally. So then employers, by and large, and I journalize this grossly, tend to still feel that once individuals have turned 50, they need to be shown an exit plan. And that's a gross mistake, because the experience, the corporate memory, and the wisdom that these folks have accumulated could be leveraged in different ways. So companies are not understanding that actually 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds and even 70-year-olds are willing to work, continue to work, but at a different pace. So as Unilever, at Sanofi, and many other companies have done, they're creating a ramp rather than a cliff for people leaving their organization. And when they do that, they retain the corporate memory, the experience, the exposure, and the wisdom. And I think there's now research coming out of several institutions that show that multi-generational workforces perform better. There's conclusive evidence in terms of productivity, in terms of creativity, and in terms of sharing knowledge. And I think a group in France called the Landois Group, and it's amazing that France, that was fighting an increase in retirement age only 3-4 years ago, and they were in the streets fighting for that, has now come a full circle, where over 150 French organizations have made longevity as part of their corporate agenda. And what does that mean? They're looking they're doing an audit on themselves. What percentage of our employees over 50 do we have, male, females, age-wise? Two, what kind of resources are we putting in the 50 plus employee group in terms of training, in terms of support, then the under 50s? What kind of ramps are we creating for this 50 plus, should 50 plus decide to leave? And there are people in this age group, 50 plus, who desire more flexibility in their work environments. And so it's not a 65 retirement aspect. It is, I think, many generations now, and I know my children's generation, the millennials, are saying, we're willing to work hard, but we want a better life work balance. So I'm willing to work 3 days a week, 4 days a week, and pay me for that, give me some good benefits, and I want to study, or I want to give back, or I want to have some time with my family if you're a young parent, or whatever. So I think employers need to understand that actually if they do not have a longevity strategy, they don't have a growth strategy. I think future growth in organizations will be very heavily dependent on having a longevity strategy. Because as we know, the birth rates are declining. In Canada, our birth rate is about 1.3. We need 2.1 for just maintaining the population. Other countries are in similar. Italy has a very low birth rate. So if you don't have that, or you don't have heavy immigration, how are you going to sustain the labor force? And so the math seems very simple and obvious, and yet employers, by and large, there are exceptions. And as I said, I think Europe and the UK are far ahead than North America is. We need to be, talking about these things. And I believe that we're at the early stages. Many of these opportunities do not get materialized overnight. So I think, we're on the right curve, but we're not yet there. But a lot of excellent work is being done by UniCredit in Europe, in the Aviva Insurance Company in the UK, who has a midlife MOT. And Unilever calls you in once you turn 50 and said, Anu, you've been an amazing employee of Unilever. What would you like to do for the next 10, 15 years of your life? And how can Unilever maintain your contribution while also giving you the opportunity in a flexible way to do things that you are passionate about? And what they found is not only are they able to keep their prized employees longer, way beyond 65, but the recruitment efforts have just become so powerful, because 27-year-olds and 22-year-olds are looking at Unilever and saying, if this is how well you look after your employees, I want to work for you. So it has a lot of benefits all around.
Yeah, wonderful. You've given me my headline, the longevity strategy is the growth strategy for companies. Yeah.
Yes. And I have to credit my good friend Annie Coleman, who does a lot of work in the UK, who came up with that phrase. So I'm stealing it from her.
Okay. Well, it gives me a good headline. I'm not complaining. And also that you said, that it creates a ramp and not a cliff. That's really good, and I like that, I just wanted to know what are the benefits really of this strategy, multi-generational, and yeah, you've explained it so well. So another thing, your website mentioned this article about a popular Stanford class, right? It's called Designing Your Life. And it talks about, having an Odyssey plan or the playbook for living a life of purpose. So people who are, like just getting introduced to this entire concept, like me, I've suddenly stumbled upon you and Neeraj and so many other people in this space. And I'm like, oh, wow, there's so much happening, So how do we do that? How do we get started?
Right. So as you know, Neeraj and I are both global ambassadors for the Stanford Center on Longevity, which is an incredible complex, and imagine a university of Stanford's caliber dedicating an entire department to this. So they've done an amazing amount of research. And I think the area that we get excited about, this whole concept of 100-year life. And the 100-year life basically sort of focuses on a handful of key parameters and approaches. One is that if you accept the fact that children born today in the Western world, for sure, and I'm sure India, in some aspects of the Indian community is the same, will live beyond 100 years or close to 100 years. So, they're saying, whereas our grandparents lived till 65 and 69, and if they retired at 65, they said, we got another 5 years. What's the big deal? We'll struggle and we'll make it to 69 or 71. And, my father passed away at the age of 66. So I don't think he worried about post-retirement, although, as you know, in our culture, retirement is not a word we use very often. We just keep on working and enjoying life, which is something that I think the Western society could learn from African cultures, Indian cultures, and other cultures. So the 100-year life basically focuses on a handful of kind of cornerstone ideas. One is, if you're going to live a 100-year life, these extra years should not be at the end of life. They should be in the middle of life. So when you're 50, think about what your next 30 years of life are going to be. And you may want to do a sabbatical. You may want to go to law school, as my wife did. You may want to explore things of giving back. Maybe you had a passion of going to Africa or India and helping with an orphanage or whatever the case, whatever your passions are. That's point number one. Point number two, which Chip mentions as well, to have a growth mindset to learning. And learning does not, the old linear stage we talk about, from, I guess, 6 till 25 was a learning phase. From 25 to 65 was an earning phase. And then was, after 65, we call it was the retirement, adjourning or leaving phase. Well, that linear phase doesn't work. I think life today is really a situation where, there are pivots driven by the individual. And you can, with the gap years, which as parents I used to frown upon with my kids. I said, gap year? No. If you take a gap year, you're never going to go to university. You have to do this in a sequential way. That was very old thinking. Today, we should do things that make sense at a given stage in life. It's about stages in life rather than age in life. I think that's another concept. So this growth mindset. So we talked about, the non-linear aspect to 100-year life. The growth mindset we talked about. And I think this whole idea of purpose, start looking for things that excite you, that get you out of bed every morning. And so that's kind of the cornerstones of the 100-year life, that the 100-year life is not linear. It's full of pivots and crosses and turnings, and that's fine. Enjoy a growth mindset for anything and everything you do. And through that, you'll find purpose. And three, being part of a community, because this is a community of people that will keep on growing. And I think the giving back comes to it. So Niraj's group and my group have now taken this on and said, how do we leverage that? And I think Niraj does an excellent job of the Wisdom Circle, where people want to work. They just don't want to work 90 hours a week anymore. But we still have something to contribute, and having this mindset that we have something to contribute. Or in our case, we're focused on the individual. How do we make my life and your life and Niraj's life more interesting, not productive in the sense of, giving back in tangible ways, in the monetary way, but how do you make it purposeful? And I think if we all left the world one day at 90, 100 or whatever, and our obituary read that person X, Y, and Z provided some support and did this and that to make the world a better place, I think that would be an obituary we would all love to see in the newspapers one day.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It would be nice to imagine what an obituary should read like and work towards that, probably. Right? Just a thought.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like what you said, at on your website, it's like a manifesto, if I may call it that providing the same opportunities in all our life stages, right? That's one of the goals of What's Next 50. And the
That's
other
right.
thing, the other thing which you said, is about finding community. So, this on LinkedIn, there's this person, one second, I'll just find his name, is very interesting. Alex Piatkovsky. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. So he's an American and he writes about, he's over 50, evidently, and he's jobless, but he posts all the time and he does a lot of satire and everything. And he's a huge hit on LinkedIn and he talks, and it's, people resonate with it because, he's speaks with humor and candor and, talks about stories of people who've been let go after, being loyal employees for so many years. And the one thing that you said, is that, people have that kinship that, okay, it's happening to you, it's happening to me. So I'm not alone in this, right? So at What's Next 50, what you're saying, that building that sense of community. So, how does that work and what can people come to What's Next 50 for?
Yeah. So I think, as Deb Stevens, one of our founding members, says, she says, people come to What's Next for the programming, to learn, to help draft their playbook for this next phase of life. But they live with a community, a like-minded bunch of people who are not judgmental, who share the same, intention. They share the same anxieties and the excitement of this phase of life. And I think this essence of community, which again, quite honestly, we've been the catalyst at What's Next. It's a community that's formed. And it started during COVID, where we had 30 people that had reached out and said, "Oh, tell us more about What's Next." And then they told their friends and their friends and their friends. And today we have 1,500 people from around the globe. And what they seem to love is, one, the global nature of this community, because we always often feel, well, this is fine in India, but I don't think it would work in Pakistan, or it wouldn't work in Malaysia, it won't work in China, it won't work in Africa. Not true. I think the human psyche, the human nature, is very consistent around the globe. We all have similar anxieties. We all have similar aspirations. We all have, we have similar value systems. I mean, show me one person that will say to you, "I don't like giving back." Show me one person that will say, "I don't like friends." Show me one person that says that, "I think I can do it alone." I don't think there are too many people like that. Maybe there are some outliers out there. So I think what we've created at What's Next is a community, a global community of like-minded people. And when I say like-minded people, I'm not talking about elitist like-minded people. We're talking about people, as Chip said, he said, white people, black people, brown people age in the same way. Men age in the same way. Women age in the same way. We all have aspirations and anxieties, whether you live in India or in Africa. So that's the commonality. So this community has told us they love the global nature. Two, they love the essence and the value system that they've created and that we support. One of openness, one of transparency, or one of vulnerability. It's amazing when you show your vulnerability to another person, how open you get and how open they get. Because we all fear the same things. When I turned 49 and left full-time work, I had no purpose, and I talk about it openly. And people say, "Oh my God, but we saw you as such a successful businessman, and you had a good earnout, and you have a lovely family, and you have a good marriage." I said, "Yeah, but none of this is perfect. We're all dysfunctional in some way, shape, or form. Show me one family that's not dysfunctional. Show me one individual doesn't have some level of dysfunctionality. We all do have. So why don't we admit to it, share it with each other, and learn from each other? Say, "Oh no, how do you manage this aspect of your life?" And I would learn from it. And Niraj and I have wonderful chats about this. And we both are comfortable sharing our vulnerabilities. And I think something I was talking to this morning over a coffee, that it's sad that this all happens in later life. Can you imagine if we shared our vulnerabilities and our anxieties and our fears in our 20s and 30s, how much help we could get to alleviate that? But we don't, because we are fearful. We think, "Oh, well, I'm the wacko in this group. Other people are doing extremely well." No, they're not. Growing up, adolescent is a really tough time for all of us. And yet, can you see a 15-year-old talking to a 16-year-old saying, but I sweat from the palm of my hands, and because if I hold a girl's hand, she may think that I'm totally crazy because, I'm sweating from a. It happens to all of us. Girls go
Yeah.
through similar anxieties, but we don't talk about it, right? And yet, in later life, we're more comfortable, maybe because we've had enough successes in our life that we're able to share these vulnerabilities and feel self-confident. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, very true. And any other message uh, for our listeners?
Let this phase of life be a time of growth, reinvention, transformation, and experimentation. A lot of shuns there. Walk in anything and everything you do with a growth mindset. Take failure out of your vocabulary. Just think of learnings. What did you learn? Just have an open mind and, just be a better friend. Somebody said, I've had friends, but now I want to be a better friend to my friends. So have that mindset of, contributing and giving, because each one of us has so much to give, so much to learn. And, just let it go and you will find your purpose. Allow some free time. And if you haven't read Chip's The Midlife Manifesto, it's an easy read. It's a wonderful summary of everything we've been talking about. So, and there's a lot of people there in the world to help us and be part of this journey. You shouldn't feel that you're alone because you're not alone. And if you feel any of this resonates with you, join What's Next 50. And you have all the details. We'd love to have you as part of our community because each one of us has an enormous amount of experience, expertise, and wisdom to share with each other. And we shouldn't lose that.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to be part of it. And another
Terrific.
thing which you said, I want to mention that, accepting our vulnerabilities. Because so many times, we tend to gaslight ourselves. We say that, no, I'm better than the next person. I don't have those problems, so I'm okay. But that, I think we should accept that we're feeling vulnerable. Maybe something is missing, and that search, that inquiry should carry on. And, and then
That's
you
right.
find,
That's right.
we find our purpose eventually.
Yeah. One last point I'll make.
Yeah.
This whole aspect of multi-generational workplaces we talked about. I think somebody gave me some good advice when I turned 50. Mehbs, have friends that are 10 years younger than you and have friends that are 10 years older than you. And I think there's so much to learn from both spectrums. I mean, maybe 10 or 20 years. So, if you're in your 60s, have friends that are in the 40s. And have friends who are in the 80s. I have an older brother who is turning 85, and the wisdom I get from him is incredible. And so I'm learning from him. And, and the other strange thing that we sometimes feel is 60 and 70-year-olds that, oh, well, the 35-year-olds don't want to talk to us. It is not true. The number of youngsters that I engage with and continue to engage with between the age of 35 and 55 is amazing. And they always feel, wow, we learned something from you. And I feel the same way that I learned something from them. So let me tell you that the 35-year-olds today are much more open and have a lot to contribute and are contributing to the older folks. When I was in my 30s, I didn't see the 50-year-olds as anything of value. And that was a mistake. It was actually my loss, not their loss. So I encourage all of us to have relationships in a multi-generational way. And unfortunately, our kids are not the ones because our kids don't want to talk to their parents, but our kids' friends want to talk to us.
Yeah,
and it
absolutely.
works vice versa.
Yeah.
So I would leave you with that parting thought.
Yeah, it's a great parting thought, have multi-generational friendships, maybe a decade younger, decade older. That's a great note to end on. Thank you, Mehbs, for
Yeah.
doing this.
Always a pleasure, Anu, and I hope things go well for you and your community. And if there's any time that you want to find out more about what's next, you know where to find us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you again.